Good morning, class. Today we're going to discuss samples and surveys. Our objectives are to be able to recognize bias samples and to identify sampling methods. Some important vocabulary for today are population, which is the entire group being studied, the sample, or the portion of the population that's being surveyed, and finally bias, which is when the sample is not a good representation of the population. Okay, let's look at our first example, identifying biased samples. Example 1A. A pet store owner surveys 100 customers to find out what brand of dog food is purchased most frequently. Well, here our population are all the customers of the pet store, while our sample are the 100 customers who are surveyed. Here the bias is that not all of the customers are going to have dogs. And we've finished example 1A. Now let's look at example 1B. A cafeteria worker asks students who buy the entree if they like the food in the cafeteria. Here our population are all of the students, while our sample is all the students who bought the entree. A possible bias here is that any students who bought the entree likely like the cafeteria food. And that wraps up example 1B. Alright, now we have three types of sampling methods. Our first type is random, which is by chance, and it is the most favored of the sampling methods. We've got systematic, which is according to a rule or a formula, and we also have the stratified method, which is at random from randomly selected groups. Let's look at example 2, which is identifying the type of sampling method. If we have people with a house number ending with a 1 are polled, which method is that? Is that by chance? Is that by a rule or a formula? Or is that a randomly selected person from a randomly selected group? To me, this looks like it is by a formula or a rule. It's any person who has a house number ending with a 1, which means that A is a systematic sampling method. How about B? A surveyor flips through the phone book and selects 30 names. That seems pretty random to me. Each person in the phone book has the same chance of being picked. So B is a random sample. How about if we have 10 study groups at the library are chosen, and one person is selected at random from each of those groups? To me, that seems very much like we are randomly picking those study groups, and then within those study groups, we are randomly picking a person, which fits the definition of a stratified sampling method. That wraps up our lesson on 4.1 samples and surveys. For tomorrow, I'm going to ask that you do the 3 problems on the your turn part of your notes.